I think perhaps for the first time it's taken so much of an effort and so many hoops to go through to get to BIC. But yeah, hats off to BIC. Thanks them. We really thank them for allowing us to have this event over here. We're deeply grateful to them. There's a short introduction that we have written. It's something. It's really a collective process, and we thought we'd read this out to you before we get into this book discussion today. It's titled Umar Khalid, A Prisoner of Conscience. Dear friends, welcome to this discussion on the book Umar Khalid and His World, an Anthology, edited by Anirban Bhattacharya, Vanujyoti Lahiri, Shudabrata Sen Gupta. They will be reading excerpts from the book, followed by a discussion with panelists Janki Nair, Ramchandra Goa, and Prakash Raj. This will be moderated by Arvind Narayan. The true measure of a democracy is not reflected in the pomp of parliament or the spectacle of elections, but in how it treats those who dissent. This is why the political prisoner must be understood not as an isolated legal category, but as a mirror held up to the state itself. The book that we will discuss today, through the life of Umar Khalid, it will show us not just his life, but also the manner in which his incarceration has taken place. That book holds a mirror to the way the Indian state today deals with dissenters, right from Khurram Parvez in Kashmir to Sunita Potham in Chhattisgarh to Surendra Gadling of the BK-16 to the recently arrested workers and activists in the Noida workers' protest. You read the book, you'll find this essay by Dr. Ramchandra Goha, where he has this to say. I must note, he writes, that he is one of many fine, upright men and women who are languishing in jail under dubious charges hastily filed by the police under orders from their political masters. Some of these Indians are also scholars and researchers. Others are social workers and civil society activists who have in their life and work shown themselves to be steadfastly committed to nonviolence and the founding values of the Constitution. It is this commitment to pluralism and democracy, and perhaps nothing else, that has made them fall foul of the authoritarian and the majoritarian tendencies of the ruling regime. The novelist Milan Kundera once said that the struggle of people against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. This powerfully captures what the state tries to do with political prisoners. The prison becomes not merely an institution of confinement, but one of erasure of public conscience itself. The state seeks not only to incarcerate people, but to delegitimize political struggles, and by locking those who speak the truth away, sever dissent and resistance from our public memory. In Umar Khalid's own words spoken in 2016, they fear us, he said, referring to the government. They fear our struggles and they fear us because we think. This has been the case throughout modern history. From colonized Ireland to apartheid South Africa, from Latin American dictatorships to occupied Palestine, prisons have long become the site where the most brutal aspects of state power are laid bare. The prison is also where the contradiction between the state's professed democratic freedoms and the actually existing unfreedoms is laid bare. Nelson Mandela, reflecting on the anti apartheid struggle, famously reminded the world. It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. This observation is especially relevant in our discussion today. If one wishes to understand the moral and democratic condition of a society, one must look not first at its constitutional promise, but at those who imprison it in the name of order, security, and law, and the conditions that persist within those four walls. Mandela's own 27 years in prison, much of it on Robben Island, transformed the prison into a political archive of anti colonial and anti racist resistance. In this sense, the history of political prisoners is inseparable from the history of liberation movements across the world. In Ireland, Bobby Sands and the 1981 Hunger Strikers fought not merely for better prison conditions, but for the recognition that they were political prisoners and not common criminals. Their insistence on political status reflected a larger struggle over legitimacy. Who has the authority to define resistance as a crime? In South Africa, Mandela and countless anti apartheid activists were imprisoned precisely because they challenged the racial sovereignty of the apartheid state. And in Palestine, the question of political prisoners remains central to the ongoing struggle against occupation. The extensive use of administrative detention, prolonged incarceration, solitary confinement, the imprisonment of political leaders, students, journalists, and even children has made the jail one of the defining institutions of the Palestinian experience under occupation. This reminds us that the political prisoner is not simply a domestic legal issue. Rather, it is a recurring feature of regimes confronted by movements for justice, equality, and self determination. The Indian context exists within this broader history. During the anti colonial struggle, Bhagat Singh and others insisted on being recognized as political prisoners because their incarceration rose from ideological conviction and collective struggle rather than criminal conduct. This distinction remains vital. Post independence India inherited not only the physical architecture of the British prison, but also the exception repression of communist and peasant movements to the repression following Naxalbari, from the emergency to the use of draconian laws including NSA, TADA, sedition law, and now UAPA. Incarceration has repeatedly functioned as an instrument of political discipline. Every phase, every era has produced its resistance and its brand of political prisoners. In contemporary India, the category of the political prisoner acquires renewed urgency. The incarceration of academics, journalists, students, human rights defenders, Dalit intellectuals, Adivasi organizers, and Muslim activists is in India, which the introduction to this book characterizes as a period marked by the dynamics of fascism of the 21st century. Umar Khalid succinctly describes this as the cocktail of Manuvad and market. Umar Khalid's PhD thesis, which I really request friends to find a copy and read, it's called The Contesting Claims and Contingencies of Rule, Singhbhum 1800 2000, is instructive in understanding the challenges faced by Adivasis right from colonial rule to present day neoliberal globalization. Even today, the resistance of Adivasi communities is viewed as a threat, which the state persecutes and silences through state repression and the criminalization of democratic protest. Being Muslim is sufficient for an increasingly egregious assault by Hindutva organizations and the state itself. Since 2014, we have repeatedly witnessed the troubling use of ordinary criminal law as an instrument of social targeting, where the process itself becomes a form of punishment for many Muslims. As Ashfaq Paikar notes in an essay in this book, Umar's politics and identity are perceived as a threat to this government. He is not the kind of citizen, Muslim or student, this current dispensation could be comfortable with. Unapologetic about his Muslim identity, he has been a left activist who started engaging with political issues during the Batla House encounter. Whether it is Bhima Koregaon or the anti-CA protests or Adivasi struggles, UAPA, that's the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, has become the toolkit to imprison dissenters. UAPA stands as one of the most enduring remnants of colonial rule. Under the British, laws of this nature existed for one purpose alone, to criminalize resistance and imprison those who dared to speak against the colonizer. It is a matter of profound shame that more than 75 years later, in a republic that claims fidelity to liberty, constitutional morality, and democratic dissent, the state continues to preserve and weaponize the very architecture of repression once used by our oppressors. UAP is characterized by vague allegations sufficing for registration of cases, prolonged pre-trial incarceration, bail is made extraordinarily difficult, which allows courts to deny bail if the allegations appear prima facie on the prosecution's version alone. Three UAPA detainees, Father Stan Swami from among the BK16, Pandu Norote, who was co-accused with Sai Baba, and the student activist Kanchan Nanaware died in detention due to the medical negligence, which the editors note in this book in their introduction, and they make this point that the prison conditions make it lethal for political prisoners. This is where Kafka's The Trial becomes an uncannily relevant framework. Prolonged incarceration without trial, repeated denial of bail, and the use of vague and expansive legal categories convert procedure into coercion. The process becomes the punishment. Draconian laws and an increasingly pliant judiciary have served as the regime's best friends in executing its political vendetta. Given that the cases that have been foisted have scant or false evidence and will all probability not withstand legal scrutiny, the rule book of the state has been to make the process the punishment. This we have seen in the case of Umar Khalid, where the Supreme Court itself abdicates its duty to protect civil liberties. It held that prolonged incarceration is not the sole determinant in granting bail, while devising a dubious theory of distinguishing Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam's role as masterminds as opposed to the others who were called local level facilitators. Here one must remember Babasaheb Ambedkar's conception of constitutional morality. It actually becomes indispensable. Ambedkar insisted that democracy cannot survive merely as an institutional arrangement. It requires a public ethic grounded in liberty, equality, fraternity, and what he called the public conscience. They will try to erase our public conscience by imprisoning our best, but we must not let them. When dissent itself is criminalized, when critique is interpreted as conspiracy, when protest is recast as terrorism, we are compelled to ask whether constitutional morality itself is under siege. The question of political prisoners is therefore at its core a constitutional question, since a democracy, secure in itself, does not fear dissent. So when a state increasingly turns to prison as a response to critique, it reveals not strength but a crisis of its legitimacy. So why was Umar Khalid imprisoned after all? Bobby Sands, the Irish revolutionary, once said, one of my favorite quotes: "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." One always goes back to this statement, a slogan of defiance for sure, but also a deeply philosophical and political understanding of dissent and resistance. The political prisoner does not endure incarceration only as an individual. The struggle is directed towards a future beyond the prison walls, towards a society in which freedom, dignity, and justice are no longer criminalized. A brighter future will emerge from the resistance of Umar Khalid and so many others. No struggle goes in vain. On 5th of January 2026, the Supreme Court denied bail to Umar and Sharjeel Imam while granting bail to Gulfisha and others. At that time, Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia made this statement. He said, "As a citizen, and like many other people, I too had hoped that they would get bail. I could not see much of a difference between those who got bail and those who did not." Umar Khalid, after this bail rejection, writes, "But what I really want those who express solidarity with me to understand is that I reject the victimhood that I have often identified with by others. There is pain in this seemingly endless wait indeed, but there is also beauty in this pain. I am content where I am, in spite of what I am being subjected to, because there's beauty in knowing that this is not about me alone. My incarceration is not merely to target me as an individual, it is to teach my fellow comrades a lesson that anyone who dares to ask uncomfortable questions to the powers that can be and will be forcibly silenced without respite. Therefore, this battle that I'm fighting to is larger than me as an individual. That is why the language in which those who believe in what I have to say speak of me and others in this case needs to change. Ours is a battle for a vision of a time in our society when some will not be more equal than others. The conviction in what makes this pain bearable, it's almost Christ like or Bhagat Singh like. Both sacrifice their life for causes of the oppressed, and there is a beauty in knowing that there is a lineage of which I am a part in a history that shall be penned for the future. That is why I wake up every day to the lines of Bhagat Singh that I have etched on my prison wall. Every tiny molecule of ash is in motion with my heart. I'm such a lunatic that I'm free even in jail. Thank you. I now invite the three editors who put the book together uh, to please come to the stage. Shuddha, Anirban, and Banu. Thank you.